There was a time when anyone would tremble upon hearing the name John D. Rockefeller. Not only was he the world's first billionaire, he's one of the richest people in human history, with a fortune equivalent to over $400 billion today. His empire, Standard Oil, became the most dominant monopoly in the world by brutally crushing competitors, taking control of multiple industries and treating business as if it was war. Here's what life was really like for the boy who rose from desperate poverty to become the most powerful businessman in America. If you use these to fall asleep, hit subscribe so you don't miss any. Comment where you're at and the time too. Kind of fun seeing all the different places. Someone from Iceland commented once and I had to Google what time zone that even is. We're heading to the 1800s in a minute. First, though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. It's pre-dawn in upstate New York, 1845. The bitter cold seeps through the cracks in the wooden walls of the farmhouse. You're stirring awake on your corn husk mattress, the scratchy wool blanket barely keeping the chill at bay. Your body knows it's time to get up. Farm work waits for no one, not even a 6-year-old kid. The first thing that hits you is the hunger, not the normal kind of hungry you might feel now, lying in your comfortable bed. This is the hollow, constant ache of someone who never quite gets enough food. Your stomach is making that weird gurgling noise again. You're John D. Rockefeller, and right now, you're about as far from a billionaire as humanly possible. The floor is ice cold against your bare feet as you climb out of bed. No central heating here, just a faint glow from the kitchen hearth that barely touches the corners of the house. Your breath comes out in visible puffs. A rooster crows outside, and you hear your mother already moving around, probably saying her morning prayers. The Rockefellers are strict Baptists. God comes before breakfast, always. John, time to fetch water. Your mother's voice calls from the kitchen. She sounds tired. She's always tired. This isn't like your warm bathroom with running water and indoor plumbing. No, you're about to grab a wooden bucket and walk to the well, break the ice on top and haul that water back to the house. Your arms will ache halfway there. Your fingers will go numb. But if you don't do it, nobody drinks or washes today. This was daily life for the richest man in American history. Weird to think about, right? I spent way too long researching 19th century rural hygiene habits for this, like concerningly long. And let me tell you, the Rockefeller family wasn't exactly living the high life. Their farmhouse was barely holding together. The clothes they wore were patched and repatched, and everybody was hungry pretty much all the time. But here's where it gets interesting. While you're hauling that water back to the house, your mind is already working. Even at 6 years old, you're thinking about money differently than other kids, like when you found that turkey nest in the woods last week. Remember that? You followed a wild turkey through the trees, watched where it went, and discovered its eggs. Most kids would have just taken the eggs for breakfast, but not you. You carefully gathered them up and brought them home to hatch. Why? Because a few turkeys could be sold for more than a bunch of eggs. You're already thinking about investments, about delayed gratification, about growing wealth. At 6, John, did you collect those eggs like I asked? Your mother's looking at you, dark circles under her eyes. Yes, Mom. And I've been thinking, you say, your voice small but determined. If we let some hatch, we could raise more turkeys and sell them at market for more money. She gives you a tired smile. Always with the schemes, aren't you? The turkey thing isn't just a cute story I made up, by the way. It actually happened. Little John Rockefeller was hustling poultry before most kids learned to tie their shoes, and he sold those turkeys for a tidy profit, then immediately started thinking about how to grow that little bit of money. So, What made John different? Why was this kid destined to become absurdly, disgustingly rich when his neighbours were all stuck in the same poverty? Part of it was his father, but not in the way you might think. Where's father, you ask, already knowing the answer. Your mother's face tightens. Business, she says simply. He'll be back when he can. The adults call your father Devil Bill behind his back, and it's not just because of his charm. William Avery Rockefeller is what people in the 1840s politely called a scoundrel, what they less politely called a complete waste of skin. He's off somewhere right now selling fake medicine to desperate people, calling himself Dr. William Livingston. He peddles bottles of mysterious liquid that supposedly cures cancer, fixes broken bones, makes you irresistible to the opposite sex, and probably whitens your teeth while it's at it. Imagine growing up knowing your dad is basically a con artist. That's John's childhood. He said he'd be back with money, your mother says, but her voice lacks conviction. Sometimes Bill does come back with money. He'll show up in the middle of the night, roaring drunk, tossing candy to the kids and pressing cash into your mother's reluctant hands. He'll stay for a week, maybe two, being loud and charming and filling the house with his presence. Then he'll vanish again. Sometimes for months. Your stomach rumbles as you chew on a piece of dry bread for breakfast. Your father's been gone for 6 weeks now. The money he left behind ran out 3 weeks ago. I'm going to check the turkey eggs, you announce, and your mother nods. Outside, in the rickety coop you built yourself, 3 turkey eggs are starting to crack. You watch, fascinated, as tiny beaks poke through. This is literally your investment hatching in front of you. Your mind races with calculations, how much you can sell them for, how many more you could breed, how long it would take to double your money. You're 6 years old, standing in the freezing cold, watching turkey eggs hatch and thinking about compound interest. That's not normal, dude. The weirdest part? While Bill is off being the worst, John develops an almost obsessive honesty. Like the moral pendulum swung completely in the opposite direction. His mother drilled religious values into him and he took to them with scary intensity. Waste not, want not, she'd say, scraping every last molecule of food from her plate. A penny saved is a penny earned, as she carefully recorded every single expense in her little book. These weren't just cute sayings to John, they were survival. They were the difference between eating and going hungry. But then something happens that changes everything. You're 10 years old now. It's 1849 and the entire town is whispering. Your father has been accused of something bad, something involving a young woman. The details are kept from the children, but you see your mother crying when she thinks no one is looking. Within days, you're packing your meagre belongings. The family has to leave town. The disgrace is too much. Where are we going? You ask your mother. Moravia, she says. We're starting over. Starting over becomes a pattern. The Rockefellers move from town to town, always one step ahead of Bill's reputation, and with each move, more responsibility falls on young John's shoulders. By 12, he's basically running the family finances. By 14, he's making loans to neighbours, and say, with interest, of course. I interviewed a historian about this, and she told me something fascinating. John's account books from when he was a teenager still exist. This kid was meticulously tracking every penny that came in and went out. He'd loan a neighbour 50 cents and note the 7% interest due in a month. He was a human calculator before calculators existed. Finally, the family settles in Cleveland, Ohio. It's 1855, and you're 16 years old. Your father's visits have become even rarer. He has another family now, a whole secret second wife and life that your mother doesn't know about. She never will. I need to find work, you tell your mother one evening. Real work. You've been helping on the farm, selling turkeys, doing odd jobs for years, but college isn't an option. There are 5 kids in the family now, and someone has to put food on the table. That someone is you. What kind of work, John? She asks. You straighten your carefully mended jacket. I'm going to work for a merchant or a bank, somewhere I can learn about business. The next morning, you make a list of every substantial business in Cleveland. You put on your one good shirt, slick down your hair, and set out with absolute determination. Your first stop is the railroad office. You walk in, back straight, voice steady despite your youth. I'd like to apply for a position as a bookkeeper, you tell the man at the desk. He looks up, sees a skinny 16-year-old and literally laughs in your face. Son, you're not even old enough to shave. Come back in 5 years. This happens at the next place too, and the next, and the next. You're how old? The bank manager asks incredulously. 16, sir, but I'm good with numbers. Very good. He's already shaking his head. Come back when you're a man. 6 weeks, 6 long weeks of rejection. Every morning you get up, put on that same shirt and try again. Most people would have given up after the first 10 rejections. You're on number 30-something and still going. Then, on September 26th, 1855, you walk into Hewitt & Tuttle, a small produce commission firm. They need a bookkeeper. You show them your handwriting, which is impeccable. You demonstrate your quick mental math. Can you start today? The owner asks. You blink, surprised. Yes, sir. Right now, sir. Good. Get to work. He doesn't mention salary. For the rest of his life, John Rockefeller celebrated September 26th as Job Day. Not his birthday, not Christmas. This day, the day he got his foot in the door of the business world. He considered it the most important day of his life. The work is grueling. You're at the office from 7 in the morning until often 9 or 10 at night. Your eyes burn from squinting at columns of numbers. Your fingers are permanently stained with ink, but you're learning. Every transaction, every negotiation, every business practice, you're absorbing it all like a sponge. One day, your boss comes in with a check for $4,000, a staggering sum in 1855. He puts it in the safe and leaves for lunch. You know the combination. When he's gone, you open the safe just to hold the check in your hands. You stare at it, mesmerized by what it represents. I am bound to be rich, you whisper to yourself. Bound to be rich. This becomes your daily mantra. Every morning before work, you look in the mirror and repeat, I am bound to be rich. Not hoping, not wanting, bound. Like it's already decided, just waiting to happen. After 3 months, you finally get your first payment. $50 for 3 months' work. That's about 50 cents a day. But your bosses are impressed with your dedication. They raise your salary to $300 per year, roughly $11,000 in today's money. It's not much, but it's enough for independence, enough to help support your mother and siblings, and even with this tiny income, you immediately begin giving 10% to charity, something you'll continue doing for the rest of your life. I know, it's weird to think of the ultimate capitalist robber baron as charitable, but there are actual church records showing John's donations from when he was making basically nothing. The guy was complicated. For 2 years, you work your fingers to the bone at Hewitt & Tuttle. You master every aspect of the business, but then the economy slows down and one of the partners quits. Suddenly, all his responsibilities fall on you, but your salary doesn't increase. You start to see the writing on the wall. The business is struggling. It might not survive much longer. Most people would panic. You see opportunity. In your boarding house, you've become friends with a chemist named Maurice Clark who works nearby. He's 28, you're just 18, but you've impressed him with your business knowledge and work ethic. One evening, over a simple dinner, Maurice leans forward. I've been thinking of starting my own produce commission business, but I need a partner who understands the books. You don't hesitate. I'm your man. You'd need to invest $2,000, Maurice says. Can you raise it? $2,000 in 1857 was no small sum, about $70,000 today. You've been saving every penny, but it's nowhere near enough. I'll find a way, you say with absolute confidence, and somehow you do. You cobble together savings and loans. You approach people with such certainty that they can't help but believe in you. At 19 years old, you become co-owner of Clark & Rockefeller, a produce commission merchant. From farm boy to business owner in 3 years. The early days are brutal. You and Maurice work from dawn until midnight. You travel constantly, meeting with farmers and merchants, building connections. Your feet develop blisters on top of blisters. You sometimes sleep on sacks of grain when there's no time to go home. But the business grows and grows. Here's the crazy part. You guys need more capital to expand, so you come up with this absolutely wild strategy. You go around Cleveland publicly saying that Clark & Rockefeller is looking to invest $10,000 in something. You don't have anywhere near that money, but you create the impression of success. And it works. Banks suddenly want to lend to you. The successful-looking business gets the credit it needs to actually become successful. It's basically fake it till you make it, 1850s style. Then the Civil War breaks out. As a devout Baptist, you strongly oppose slavery. The Union cause matters to you, but you also have 6 mouths to feed at home. Your mother and siblings still rely on your income. So instead of enlisting yourself, you pay $300 for a substitute soldier. This was legal back then. And you even equip several more Union soldiers out of your own pocket. Meanwhile, the war creates an economic boom in the northern states. Cleveland becomes a strategic location for the Union. Food prices inflate dramatically. Your produce business quadruples almost overnight. By 1862, you and Maurice clear a profit of $17,000, over $500,000 in today's money. Not bad for a 23-year-old who started with nothing, but something even bigger is about to land in your lap. One evening, a man named Samuel Andrews comes to your office. He's a young English chemist with an interesting proposition. Before electricity, people lit their homes with oil lamps. Traditionally, this oil came from whales, but whaling was expensive and difficult, and some whale species were being hunted to near extinction. But in 1859, people had discovered you could extract rock oil or petroleum by drilling into the ground, and it burned just as well as whale oil. Andrews has a secret process for refining this crude oil using sulfuric acid, turning it into something called kerosene, which burns cleaner and brighter than regular oil. He needs investors to build a refinery in Cleveland, which is conveniently located just a day's ride from the Pennsylvania oil regions. You and Maurice look at each other. You've got money to spare now thanks to the war boom. Why not diversify? You lend Andrews $4,000 to set up his refinery, considering it a side venture while you continue with your produce business. But within a year, something unexpected happens. The oil refinery starts making more money than your main business. A lot more money. "We need to talk," you tell Maurice one day, ledgers spread open before you both. "Look at these numbers." The oil business is wildly profitable, but it's also unstable and risky. The supply fluctuates dramatically. Sometimes there's so much oil that prices crash to 10 cents a barrel. Other times it seems like the oil fields are drying up and prices soar to $14. Many people think oil is just a temporary fad that will soon run out. But you see something different. You see the future. "We should sell the produce business," you say. "Go all in on oil." Morris stares at you like you've lost your mind. That's insane. The produce business is stable. Oil could be gone tomorrow. Oil isn't going anywhere, you say with that eerie certainty that's become your trademark. This is just the beginning. The argument goes back and forth for weeks. Finally, Maurice agrees to switch to oil, but he's nervous. The volatility of the market keeps him up at night. And then, in 1865, after a particularly rough patch in the oil business, Maurice reaches his breaking point. "I want out," he tells you. "Buy my share." The price he names is $72,500, about $135 million in today's money. It's a fortune, and to buy him out, you'll need to go into significant debt. Everyone thinks you're crazy to take on this risk. The oil business is too unpredictable, too dangerous. You could lose everything. But that same day, news arrives from Pennsylvania. A massive new oil field has been discovered. The market is about to be flooded with crude oil. Most refiners see this as a disaster. Prices will crash again. You see it differently. You see opportunity where others see catastrophe. "I'll buy your share," you tell Maurice, your voice steady despite the fear you're feeling inside. You're 26 years old. You've just gone all in on one of the riskiest industries in America, and now you need to find a way to crush your competition if you want to survive. The foundation of the world's greatest fortune was about to be laid, and it all started with that scared, hungry kid on a corn husk mattress. But how John Rockefeller went from ambitious young businessman to the most feared monopolist in American history, that's where things get really interesting. The morning sun filters through the window of your small Cleveland office. It's 1867, and you're staring at your ledger books with intense concentration. You've renamed the company Standard Oil, and you're plotting domination while most of your competitors are just trying to survive. This is what's wild about John Rockefeller. While everyone else saw the oil business as chaotic and unpredictable, he saw patterns, opportunity. He had this freakish ability to look at the same market everyone else was looking at and see something completely different. You push back from your desk and walk to the large map on your wall. Small red pins mark every competing refinery in Cleveland. Blue pins show the railroad routes. Green pins indicate your growing network of buyers and suppliers. To you, this isn't just a map. It's a battlefield. "Mr. Rockefeller," your clerk knocks softly. "Mr. Flagler is here to see you." And this is where the story takes a turn. Henry Flagler enters your office, and you immediately stand to greet him. He's about 10 years older than you, impeccably dressed and radiates confidence. But there's something else about him, a certain ruthlessness in his eyes that matches your own. "John," he says with a FMC handshake, "I've been looking at your operation. Impressive for a young man." "Thank you," you reply, gesturing for him to sit. "But I have plans for much more." What most people don't realize is that Rockefeller didn't build his empire alone. Henry Flagler was just as important to the creation of Standard Oil as John was. The two men were eerily similar, religious, disciplined, detail-oriented, but Flagler had one quality that would change everything. He approached business like it was war. The problem with this industry, Flagler says, leaning forward in his chair, is that there are too many players, too much competition. It drives prices down, makes the whole business unstable. You nod. Exactly my thinking. "So what's the solution?" Flagler asks, though his smile suggests he already knows your answer. "Consolidation," you say without hesitation. One company, large enough to control the market, stable prices, predictable supplies. Flagler's smile widens. "And who do you think should be that company?" You don't blink. "Standard Oil." Look, I've read through a ton of business histories, and this partnership between Rockefeller and Flagler was genuinely terrifying for their competitors. These guys weren't just trying to build a successful business, they were systematically planning to eliminate everyone else in the industry. So it's early 1868, and you're sitting in your office with Flagler mapping out a strategy that would make Machiavelli blush. "The railroads are our key," Flagler says, tracing a finger along the rail lines on your map. "They're desperate for consistent business." And this is where things get crafty. At the time, oil was transported by train, and three major railroad companies dominated the routes: the New York Central, the Erie, and the Pennsylvania Railroad. Flagler explains his idea. What if we guarantee them a certain volume of shipments? In exchange, they give us a special rate, a secret rate. Your eyes narrow. How much lower than the official rate? Flagler grins. Half, maybe less. Okay, so let me explain what's happening here, because it's kind of brilliant and kind of evil. Rockefeller and Flagler are about to negotiate what were called railroad rebates. Basically, they'd pay the official shipping rate that everyone else paid, but then the railroad would secretly give them back a portion of that money, like a discount no one else knew about. So their plan was pretty simple but devastating. 1. Get secret shipping discounts from the railroads. 2. Undercut all competitors on price, since their costs are lower. 3. When competitors go bankrupt, buy their refineries for pennies on the dollar. 4. Repeat until you control everything. Within months, you've negotiated deals with both the New York Central and the Erie railroads. In exchange for guaranteed daily shipments, Standard Oil gets a 75% discount on the official rates. Your competitors are paying $2.40 per barrel shipped. You're paying around 60 cents. Of course, these deals are kept strictly secret. If your competitors knew, they'd demand the same rates or complain to the government. The actual meeting with the railroad executives was something straight out of a movie. Picture this: a private room in Cleveland's most exclusive hotel, cigar smoke hanging thick in the air, 4 men, you, Flagler, and 2 railroad executives, huddled around a small table speaking in hushed tones. Gentlemen, you say, your voice soft but commanding, Standard Oil can guarantee you 60 carloads of refined oil every day without fail. The railroad men exchange glances. That kind of consistent volume is unprecedented. In exchange, Flagler continues, we require special consideration on rates. One of the railroad men shifts uncomfortably. What you're suggesting isn't conventional. You lean forward, your eyes intense. Neither is what we're offering. Stability, predictability in an unpredictable market. They agree. Of course they agree. And just like that, you've tilted the playing field in your favor. With your shipping costs now dramatically lower than everyone else's, you can sell your kerosene for less than your competitors and still make a higher profit margin. It's only a matter of time before they start to crumble, but you're just getting started. While all this business maneuvering is happening, you've also settled into domestic life. In 1864, you married Laura Celestia Spellman, a woman who shared your Baptist faith and disciplined nature. By 1868, you have 2 children, with more to come. Despite your growing wealth, you live modestly. Your house in Cleveland is comfortable but not ostentatious. You don't drink, smoke, or gamble. Your main indulgences are your church donations and the simple pleasure of playing with your children in the evenings. Shouldn't we get a bigger house? Laura asks one evening as you're reviewing your account books at the dining table. You could certainly afford it. You look up, considering. What we have is sufficient. Better to reinvest the money where it can grow. She smiles slightly. Always the businessman. Always, you agree. This is something that always gets me about Rockefeller. The guy was becoming insanely wealthy, but he lived like a middle-class minister. No flash, no extravagance. Every penny was accounted for, every expenditure questioned. He was building an empire with the discipline of a monk. Back at Standard Oil, your strategy is working better than even you expected. The lower prices you're able to offer are putting immense pressure on your competitors. Some are already approaching you about selling out, but then something happens that threatens to derail everything. The discovery of massive new oil fields in Pennsylvania. Suddenly, there's so much crude oil on the market that prices collapse. Oil that was selling for $4 a barrel now goes for $2.40, and many predict it will fall even further. Your competitors are panicking. Nearly 90% of oil refiners are losing money. You and Flagler, however, see this as the perfect storm, a chance to consolidate the industry even faster than you'd planned. Most of these refineries are operating at a loss, Flagler points out, reviewing the industry reports. They're desperate, which makes them cheap to acquire, you finish his thought. One evening, in late 1871, you're working late at your office. The lamp casts long shadows. As you methodically update your ledger, there's a knock at the door. It's Tom Scott, president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, the one major railroad you don't have a deal with. Mr. Rockefeller, he says, removing his hat, I believe we have mutual interests to discuss. Scott proposes something even more ambitious than your previous railroad deals, a secret alliance between the largest railroads and a select group of the largest refiners, with Standard Oil at the center. They call it the South Improvement Company, or SIC. Under this arrangement, Standard Oil would not only get a 50% rebate on transportation costs, but would also receive a payment, called a drawback, on the shipments of any competitors who weren't part of the alliance. Let that sink in for a second. Your competitors would be paying full price to ship their oil, and then the railroad would give you a portion of that money. It's like if Burger King had to pay McDonald's a fee every time they sold a Whopper. You're even promised detailed information about your competitors' shipments, how much they're shipping, where it's going, who they're selling to. This is no longer just business. This is warfare. The South Improvement Company deal would effectively give you a stranglehold on the entire industry. Anyone outside the alliance would be squeezed to death by the higher shipping rates and the invisible tax they were paying to you. It solves our problems at a stroke, Flagler says excitedly after Scott leaves. The entire industry stabilized under our control. You nod slowly. It's perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. Your caution was justified. By early 1872, rumors of the alliance begin to spread. When people read in the newspapers that shipping rates for the three most important railroads had doubled overnight, they knew exactly who to blame. The backlash is immediate and fierce. Thousands take to the streets in protest. Oil producers in the Pennsylvania oil regions organize a boycott of any refinery suspected of being part of the South Improvement Company. Without a supply of crude oil, your refineries are useless. After just 2 months, the South Improvement Company is disbanded, a public relations disaster. But here's the thing, even though the SIC failed, the mere rumour of its existence created a panic in the industry. Everyone assumes Standard Oil still has secret deals with the railroads, whether true or not, and you decide to use that fear to your advantage. In a period of just 6 weeks, known later as the Cleveland Massacre, you approach 22 of the 26 oil refining companies in Cleveland and give them an ultimatum: sell to Standard Oil or be crushed. You walk into each competitor's office with the same offer. Standard Oil will buy them out, paying not in cash but in Standard Oil stock. The alternative is to face Standard's lower prices, superior technology, and perceived railroad advantages. Mr. Rockefeller is here to see you, the secretary announces, and the refinery owner's face goes pale. You enter, hat in hand, the picture of politeness. Good afternoon. I think you know why I'm here. The refinery owner, a man named Reynolds, who you've known for years, gestures to a chair. John, let's not dance around it. You're buying everyone up. Consolidation is the future, you say calmly. This industry can't survive with dozens of small refineries undercutting each other. Reynolds laughs bitterly. So instead, one big refinery will undercut us all until we're gone. You open your briefcase and remove some papers. I'm prepared to offer you $45,000 for your refinery, paid in Standard Oil stock. Reynolds's eyes widen. His refinery is worth at least $150,000. That's robbery. That's the future, you correct him. Your refinery is losing money every day. How long can you keep operating at a loss? 6 months? A year? And what will your refinery be worth then? You slide the papers across his desk. Standard Oil stock, on the other hand, will only increase in value as we grow. Reynolds stares at the papers for a long moment. And if I refuse, your expression doesn't change. Then we wish you the best of luck competing in the new market. We don't know exactly what went down in these meetings, but we do know the results. Within those 6 weeks, 22 out of the 26 refineries in Cleveland sold to Standard Oil, most for a fraction of their actual value. Whenever anyone sold out, you gave them only 2 options: sign a contract prohibiting them from ever re-entering the oil business, or join Standard Oil as an employee or partner. Many chose to join, which meant you now had the brightest minds in the industry working for you instead of against you. By mid-1872, you'd achieved something unprecedented. Standard Oil now controlled 85% of Cleveland's oil refining capacity. You'd gone from 1 refinery to 22 in less than 3 months. The funniest part about all this? John was only 33 years old. 33. While most guys his age were still figuring out what to do with their lives, he had already built the foundation of one of the greatest business empires in history. But just as you're consolidating your Cleveland dominance, disaster strikes. On September 18th, 1873, a financial panic hits Wall Street. The stock market collapses, banks fail across the country, the US economy plunges into a depression that will last 6 years. For the first time, oil prices drop not because of oversupply, but because of collapsing demand. Standard Oil has to temporarily shut down all but 2 of its Cleveland refineries. By 1874, a single barrel of oil is trading for just 48 cents, less than the cost of the wooden barrel it's stored in. It seems like the entire industry might collapse, but unlike your competitors, Standard Oil has carefully managed finances, excellent credit with banks, and modernized, efficient refineries. Even in these bleak conditions, you're still able to operate at a small profit while others bleed money. And as always, you see opportunity in crisis. You call Flagler into your office one cold January morning in 1874. The streets of Cleveland are nearly empty, businesses closed or operating at reduced hours. The Depression has left the city, like much of America, in a state of economic paralysis. Henry, you say, spreading a map on your desk, it's time to expand. Flagler looks at you like you've lost your mind. Expand? Now? In the middle of a depression? You trace your finger across the map, touching Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York. Everyone is struggling. Refineries in these cities are operating at a loss, burning through their reserves just to stay alive, which means they're cheap, Flagler says slowly, beginning to understand. Exactly, you nod. We've conquered Cleveland. Now we take the rest. And that's exactly what you do. You initiate a nationwide buyout campaign, and whenever anyone is reluctant to sell, you resort to the same indirect tactics that worked in Cleveland. You buy up all the available barrels so competitors can't package their oil. You reserve all available railroad capacity so they can't ship their product. You use your railroad connections to get their shipping rates raised to ruinous levels. Then, when they're on the verge of bankruptcy, you swoop in with an offer to save them by buying them out, at a steep discount, of course. Picture this scene, a small refinery owner in Pittsburgh sitting in his cold office. It's been weeks since he's received a shipment of barrels for his refined oil. His workers are idle. The banks won't extend more credit. His wife has already pawned her jewelry to keep the business afloat. Then you walk in, impeccably dressed despite the economic depression, calm, confident. "I understand you're having some difficulties," you say, removing your gloves. The refinery owner looks up, his face haggard. "You engineered those difficulties. You don't deny it. I've come with a solution." By the time the Depression begins to lift in the late 1870s, Standard Oil controls over half of Pittsburgh's refining capacity, the largest refineries in Philadelphia, and has secured a dominant position in New York as well. To further strengthen your grip on the industry, you begin building a network of pipelines to transport oil. These pipelines reduce your reliance on the railroads and further lower your costs. With these pipelines stretching across the eastern United States like tentacles, Standard Oil earns a new nickname among its enemies, the Octopus, and you, John D. Rockefeller, are only just beginning. By your late 30s, you're already one of the wealthiest men in America, and you've laid the groundwork for a monopoly that will soon control 90% of the oil refining in the entire country. The ruthless tactics that built this empire have made you many enemies. The largest newspaper in America calls Standard Oil the most cruel, impudent, pitiless, and grasping monopoly that ever fastened upon a country. But in your mind, you're bringing order to chaos, stability to volatility. You're not destroying the oil industry, you're saving it from itself. You stand at your office window watching the snow fall on Cleveland. Your competitors fear you. The public is beginning to hate you, but you're convinced that what you're doing is not just good business. It's your divine calling. "Mr. Rockefeller," your secretary interrupts your thoughts. "Mr. Flagler needs to see you immediately. There's a situation with the Pennsylvania Railroad." You turn from the window, straightening your jacket. "Tell him I'll be right there." The battle for complete control of America's oil industry is about to enter its most vicious phase, and at its center stands you, the quiet, religious man who treats business like war. The clock on your office wall shows nearly midnight. You're still at your desk, lamplight casting shadows across the papers spread before you. It's 1877, and the conflict with the Pennsylvania Railroad has reached a breaking point. You tap your pencil against the ledger. For years, the railroads have been essential to your business. Now, they're becoming a liability. "Mr. Rockefeller?" Your assistant knocks softly. "Mr. Flagler asked me to give you this." He hands you a telegram. Tom Scott, president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, has done something unforgivable. He started building his own oil refineries. "So," you say quietly, folding the telegram, "war it is." For the railroad companies, the oil industry had been a tremendous source of business. But as Standard Oil began laying its vast network of pipelines, the railroads faced the terrifying prospect that their most important customer was making them obsolete. So Tom Scott decided to fight back by entering the oil business himself. Bad move. You gather your top executives the next morning. The room is tense, faces grim. These men understand what's at stake. "Gentlemen," you say, your voice mild as ever, "the Pennsylvania Railroad has declared war on Standard Oil. They've chosen to compete with us directly." Flagler leans forward. "What do you propose, John?" You smile slightly. "We're going to crush them." I'm not exaggerating when I say what happened next was one of the most brutal corporate battles in American history. Rockefeller launched what was essentially a three-pronged attack. First, Standard Oil cancelled all shipments with the Pennsylvania Railroad and redirected them to their competitors. Second, Standard lowered the price of kerosene so dramatically that the Pennsylvania's new refineries couldn't possibly make a profit. Third, and this was the killer, Standard convinced the New York Central and Erie railroads to lower their shipping fees to ridiculous levels purely to bleed the Pennsylvania Railroad dry. The Pennsylvania Railroad was forced to make an impossible choice: either match these rock-bottom rates and lose money on every shipment, or maintain their prices and watch their customers flee to cheaper competitors. Tom Scott was trapped, and he knew it. He was literally paying refineries to use his railroad just to maintain some semblance of market share. But the consequences of this corporate war spread far beyond just Standard Oil and the Pennsylvania Railroad. The B&O Railroad, another major line, also had to slash their rates and lay off workers to compete. And here's where things get really dark. In July 1877, with wages cut by 20% and workers being laid off by the hundreds, railroad employees across the country went on strike. It turned violent almost immediately. Have you seen the papers? Flagler bursts into your office one morning, his face pale. You look up calmly. I have. The headlines scream about riots in Pittsburgh. Strikers have torched Pennsylvania Railroad property. 500 freight cars, 120 locomotives, and 27 buildings are now smoldering ruins. Dozens are dead. And while you didn't directly cause this violence, your business tactics helped set the stage for it. Flagler paces nervously. This is getting out of hand, John. Perhaps we should ease the pressure. But you see an opportunity even in this chaos. The Pennsylvania Railroad is more vulnerable than ever. Now is not the time to relent, you say. Now is the time to end this. A few days later, Tom Scott, once the titan of the railroad industry, sends a representative to your office. The Pennsylvania Railroad is ready to surrender. You orchestrate a massive deal with all the major railroads. Standard Oil will give the Pennsylvania Railroad 47% of its shipping business. The New York Central, the Erie, and the B&O will share the rest. In exchange, you demand a very large secret rebate on the Pennsylvania's rates, detailed information about competitors' shipments, and 20 cents for every barrel that passes through any of the railroads. The railroads have no choice but to agree. By 1879, Standard Oil effectively controls the entire oil industry and has tremendous influence over the railroads as well. But there's an unexpected consequence of your victory. Tom Scott, broken by his defeat, suffers a stroke shortly after the deal is signed. He dies within a year, and this creates a powerful enemy for you. Scott had been a mentor to a young Andrew Carnegie, who is now the dominant force in the American steel industry. Carnegie blames you for Scott's death and vows revenge. The King of Oil versus the King of Steel, two of the wealthiest, most powerful men in America, now locked in a bitter personal rivalry. Carnegie once reportedly said of you, "Rockefeller is the only man who makes me uncomfortable when he enters a room." You felt similarly about him. Carnegie reminds me of myself, only he lacks balance. Despite all this corporate warfare, your personal life remains remarkably stable and modest. You move your family to New York City in the late 1870s, but rather than building some grandiose mansion, you purchase a comfortable but unpretentious home. Your daily routine is almost monastic in its discipline. You wake early, spend time in prayer and Bible reading, eat a simple breakfast, and then head to your office. You don't drink, smoke, or engage in the extravagant social life that consumes many of New York's elite. Your favorite pastime is simply playing with your children in the evenings. One of your employees once remarked that you'd rather be down on all fours with your children than at the most elegant dinner in New York. This strange contrast between your ruthless business practices and your gentle family life puzzles many. But in your mind, there's no contradiction. Business is business. Family is sacred. And despite your growing notoriety, you continue to donate at least 10% of your income to religious and charitable causes, a practice you've maintained since you received your very first paycheck. Back at Standard Oil, you're now focusing on vertical integration. Until this point, you've primarily pursued horizontal integration, taking over competitors who do the same thing you do. Now you want to control every step of the supply chain, from oil wells to refineries, to transportation, storage, and retail. This wasn't just about greed, it was about control, about building a system so perfectly integrated that nothing was left to chance. In 1885, a massive new oil field is discovered in Lima, Ohio. It seems like a blessing at first. More oil means more business for Standard, but there's a problem. It smells like a skunk died in a barrel of rotten eggs, your chief chemist explains, wrinkling his nose at a sample of the Ohio oil. Even after refining, this skunk oil, as it's called, has such a high sulfur content that it's practically worthless. It trades for as little as 15 cents per barrel because no one wants to buy kerosene that makes their house smell like death. Most refiners give up on the Ohio oil fields immediately. Not you. Find a way to remove the sulfur. You tell your team of chemists. Whatever it costs. For almost a year, they work on the problem. Finally, they develop a process to remove the sulfur, making the oil usable. Standard Oil is suddenly the only company able to profitably refine and sell this cheaper form of oil. This gives you a massive advantage when, a few years later, oil begins to be discovered in massive quantities throughout the Midwest and Southwest, in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and California. And this ties into another major development, the rise of the automobile. As cars begin to replace horse-drawn carriages, the demand for gasoline, previously considered a waste product of the refining process, skyrockets. Once again, your foresight pays off spectacularly. While others were focused solely on kerosene for lamps, you'd built an empire that was perfectly positioned to fuel the automotive revolution. By the 1890s, Standard Oil controls approximately 90% of all oil refineries and pipelines in the United States. Your personal wealth has grown to unimaginable levels, and yet the larger Standard Oil grows, the more enemies it creates. Small businessmen crushed by your tactics. Politicians offended by your power. Journalists outraged by your monopolistic practices. You start to take a more hands-off approach to the daily operations of Standard Oil, delegating more responsibilities to trusted lieutenants. Part of this is strategic. By distancing yourself personally from some of the company's more aggressive tactics, you create a buffer between yourself and public criticism. But it's also practical. The empire has grown too vast for any one person to manage directly. Standard Oil now has operations in multiple states and countries, thousands of employees, and a dizzying array of subsidiaries and associated companies. "Mr. Rockefeller seems tired today," one of your secretaries whispers to another as you pass by. You pretend not to hear, but it's true. You're approaching 50. The stress of building and defending your empire is taking its toll. You've developed digestive problems, and your hair has fallen out completely. Despite being one of the richest men in the world, you now subsist primarily on crackers, milk, and a few simple vegetables, all your stomach can handle. But even as your personal involvement in day-to-day operations decreases, your wealth continues to grow at an astonishing rate. With Standard Oil's near-total dominance of the oil industry and the increasing importance of oil in the American economy, money flows into your coffers in ever-increasing amounts. You begin to think more seriously about how to manage this vast fortune. For a man as methodical as you, simply piling up wealth for its own sake isn't satisfying. There must be a purpose, a plan, a system. That's when you hire Frederick Gates, a Baptist minister, to help you manage your philanthropic activities. It's an unconventional choice, a minister rather than a financial expert, but it proves to be brilliant. Years later, when asked who the greatest businessman you ever met was, you'll point to Frederick Gates. Gates helps you organize your charitable giving and make strategic investments that grow your non-oil wealth substantially. He also serves as a mentor to your son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., who's now finishing his education at Brown University. Together, Gates and Jr. begin to transform your haphazard personal investments into a systematic portfolio that will eventually multiply your fortune far beyond what even Standard Oil could generate. One of their most significant investments is in iron ore. On Gates' advice, you purchase vast tracts of the Mesabi Range in Minnesota, which contains some of the richest iron deposits in North America. This puts you on a collision course with Andrew Carnegie, who needs iron ore for his steel mills. The rumor spreads that you're planning to build your own steel mill to compete directly with Carnegie. It's not true, at least not yet, but the mere possibility terrifies Carnegie. Mr. Rockefeller, your secretary interrupts your thoughts one afternoon. Mr. Carnegie's representative is here to see you. The meeting that follows leads to one of the most lucrative deals in American business history. Carnegie agrees to buy a minimum of 600,000 tons of ore from your mines every year and to transport it exclusively through your railroads. In exchange, you agree never to enter the steel business, and Carnegie gets a secret rebate on the ore, ironically similar to the railroad rebates that helped you build Standard Oil. The deal is so profitable for both of you that a wall of silence descends around it. Neither of you wants competitors or the government to know just how much money you're making, but someone else has noticed the immense potential of this partnership. J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker in America. Morgan sees an opportunity to create something even bigger than Carnegie Steel or Standard Oil. He envisions a steel monopoly that combines Carnegie's mills with your iron ore mines and several other major steel companies. One winter morning in 1901, Morgan sends a representative to meet with you. Mr. Morgan would like to discuss the purchase of your Mesabi Range holdings, the man says. You surprise him by replying, "He should speak with my son about that." Morgan is initially dismissive of having to negotiate with your 27-year-old son. He assumes Junior will be an easy mark, but when Morgan meets with Junior and bluntly asks, "What's your price?" Junior isn't intimidated. "Mr. Morgan," he says calmly, "I think there must be some mistake. I did not come here to sell. I understood you wished to buy." By insisting that Morgan name the price first, Junior gains the upper hand in the negotiations. Morgan, taken aback by the young man's composure, has to reconsider his approach. Eventually, Morgan offers $88.5 million in US steel stock for your iron ore holdings, the equivalent of over $3 billion today. You accept, and US Steel becomes the first billion-dollar corporation in American history, and you now own a substantial portion of it. While all this is happening, Standard Oil continues to grow more powerful and more profitable. The rise of the automobile has turned gasoline from a waste product into liquid gold. Your empire now spans the globe, with operations in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. But as the 19th century gives way to the 20th, a new threat emerges. The progressive movement, led by journalists and politicians determined to break the power of monopolies, sets its sights on Standard Oil. They call men like you robber barons, industrial monarchs who've built empires through questionable means. The press portrays you as a cold, calculating villain who crushes smaller businesses without remorse. The irony is that as these attacks intensify, you're actually less and less involved in the day-to-day operations of Standard Oil. You're in your 60s now, in semi-retirement, focused more on your philanthropic activities than on business. But to the public, you are Standard Oil, and Standard Oil is increasingly seen as the enemy of the common man. One evening, you're sitting in your library reading the latest newspaper articles about yourself. They're not flattering. "Father," Junior enters the room, concern on his face. Have you seen what they're saying? You fold the newspaper calmly. I have. Doesn't it bother you? He asks. You consider the question for a moment. The public will form its judgment. If that judgment is just, I have nothing to fear. If it's unjust, you shrug. Well, I've faced worse. But privately, you're concerned. The political winds are shifting. There's talk of new antitrust legislation, of presidential candidates promising to break up monopolies like Standard Oil. And there's one journalist in particular whose work is causing you significant discomfort, Ida Tarbell. Tarbell's father was one of the independent oil refiners who went bankrupt during Standard Oil's rise to power. Now she's writing a devastating exposé of your business practices, publishing it in monthly installments that the American public devours eagerly. What makes Tarbell's work so damaging is that it's meticulously researched. She's not just slinging mud, she's revealing actual documents, testimony from former Standard Oil employees, details of secret deals and strong-arm tactics that had previously been hidden from public view. Your policy is never to respond directly to critics, so Tarbell's accusations go unchallenged. This only seems to validate them in the public's mind. As the new century dawns, you find yourself in an unusual position. You're wealthier than you've ever been, with your fortune growing daily. You control, directly or indirectly, a significant portion of the American economy, and yet your public image has never been worse. Presidents Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft both make breaking up Standard Oil a key part of their political agendas. The Sherman Antitrust Act, previously seldom enforced, is now being wielded against your company. The legal battles begin, and they will stretch on for years. Standard Oil fights in court after court, winning some cases, losing others, but always facing more legal challenges. You watch these developments with growing detachment. Your son and Frederick Gates are increasingly handling both your business and philanthropic affairs. Your health is fragile. You spend more time at your estates in New York and Florida trying to recover your strength. Sir? Your butler interrupts your breakfast one morning in 1909. There's a telephone call for you. It's Mr. Gates. You pick up the receiver. Yes, Frederick? John, Gates says, his voice tense. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear the government's case against Standard Oil. You're silent for a moment. The Supreme Court, the final arbiter. After this, there will be nowhere else to appeal. I see, you say finally. Keep me informed. You hang up and return to your breakfast, your face betraying no emotion, but inside you know that the empire you spent your life building is facing its greatest threat yet. The stage is set for the most significant antitrust case in American history. The outcome will not only determine the fate of Standard Oil, but will reshape the entire American business landscape for generations to come. And all of this from the boy who once followed a turkey into the woods to steal its eggs. The morning sun streams through the windows of your mansion in Pocantico Hills, your estate north of New York City. It's 1910, and at 71 years old you've grown accustomed to a certain routine. Wake before dawn, light stretching, a simple breakfast of toast, milk, and fruit. Reading the Bible. Prayer. But today there's a tension in your body that the familiar routine can't quite dispel. Sir, your butler says, entering with the morning newspaper, I thought you might want to see this immediately. The headline screams across the front page, Supreme Court to rule on Standard Oil case tomorrow. You take the paper with a steady hand, though your heart rate picks up slightly. Tomorrow. After years of legal battles, it all comes down to tomorrow. Will you be going into the city today, sir? The butler asks. You consider for a moment. No, I think I'll play golf instead. This is not a joke. On the day before the Supreme Court decided the fate of Standard Oil, Rockefeller actually went golfing. The man had ice in his veins. As your chauffeur drives you to the golf course, you gaze out at the Hudson River. The Standard Oil case has been winding through the courts for years now. President Theodore Roosevelt, who called men like you malefactors of great wealth, made breaking up your company a personal crusade. The government's lawsuit alleges that Standard Oil has violated the Sherman Antitrust Act by monopolizing the oil industry and restraining trade. The evidence against you is substantial. Records of railroad rebates, predatory pricing, corporate espionage, and secret ownership of supposedly independent competitors. Your lawyers have fought brilliantly at every turn, but you've known for some time that the tide of public and political opinion has turned against you, against monopolies in general. At the golf course, your regular partners are waiting, wealthy men like yourself, though none quite as wealthy. "Big day tomorrow, John," one says as you approach. You smile pleasantly. Every day is a big day when the Lord grants you the health to enjoy it. They exchange glances. Your calm in the face of potential disaster is unnerving. "You're not worried?" another asks incredulously. You select a club, considering. Worry never solved anything. The Supreme Court will decide as it will. I've done my work. Now it's in God's hands. The funny thing is, you meant it. This wasn't just a show for your golf partners. Rockefeller had this almost eerie acceptance of things beyond his control. He'd spent decades building Standard Oil with meticulous planning and ruthless execution. But once something was truly out of his hands, he had this ability to just let it go. The next morning, you're having breakfast when the telephone rings. It's Frederick Gates. "John," he says, his voice tight with tension, "the court has ruled." You set down your spoon carefully. "Go on." "They've ordered Standard Oil to be dissolved, broken into separate companies within 6 months. There's a long pause. Gates is clearly waiting for an explosion of anger, despair, something, but the seconds tick by in silence. "John, are you there?" "Yes," you say calmly. "Thank you for letting me know." You hang up the phone and return to your breakfast. On May 15th, 1911, the Supreme Court found Standard Oil guilty of monopolizing the oil industry through illegal business practices. The court ordered the company to be split into 34 separate entities, each with its own board of directors. After 41 years, your empire had been dealt what appeared to be a fatal blow. That afternoon, reporters gather outside your estate, hoping for a comment. You rarely speak to the press, but today you decide to make an exception. You step out onto the porch, immaculately dressed as always, your bald head gleaming in the spring sunshine. "Mr. Rockefeller," one reporter calls out, "what's your reaction to the Supreme Court's decision?" You smile slightly. "I have nothing to say." "Sir, they've ordered Standard Oil to be broken up. Doesn't that upset you?" You regard them for a moment. "Have a pleasant day, gentlemen." And with that, you turn and go back inside, leaving them baffled by your apparent indifference. The truth is more complicated. The Supreme Court's decision is certainly not what you wanted. The company you built from nothing, the enterprise you crafted with such care and protected so fiercely, is to be dismantled. But there's an irony here that few people understand yet. By forcing Standard Oil to break up into dozens of smaller companies, the government may have actually done you a massive financial favor. See, the thing about monopolies is they're often undervalued by the market because they're seen as risky, precisely due to potential antitrust action. Their stock prices don't always reflect their true worth, but when you break a monopoly into smaller, more focused companies, those new entities can sometimes be valued much higher collectively than the original monopoly was. You still own about a quarter of Standard Oil's stock. When the company splits into 34 different companies, you'll get your proportional share in each of them, and once those companies are open to public trading without the shadow of monopoly accusations hanging over them, well, the market might have some surprises in store. 3 months after the Supreme Court's decision, you're sitting in your library with Frederick Gates and Jr. reviewing the latest financial reports. "This can't be right," Junior says, frowning at the papers. Gates smiles slightly. "I've checked the figures 3 times. They're accurate." You lean back in your chair, a hint of amusement in your eyes. "So breaking up Standard Oil has made us richer, significantly richer," Gates confirms. "The combined value of your holdings in the successor companies has almost tripled since the breakup was announced." The stock market had reacted to the breakup by driving up the value of the newly independent companies. Investors were excited about the potential of these focused, efficient businesses freed from the legal troubles that had plagued Standard Oil. The government's attempt to punish you had instead made you wealthier than ever. By the end of 1911, your net worth was approaching $900 million, the equivalent of about $25 billion today, adjusted for inflation, and it was still growing. You were closing in on becoming the world's first billionaire. The next day, you're having lunch with Junior at your city residence. He's 37 now, a serious man with a strong sense of responsibility. "Father," he says, setting down his fork, "what do you intend to do now?" You look at him questioningly. "About the money," he clarifies. "It just keeps growing, even after the breakup. Something needs to be done with it." You nod slowly. This has been on your mind as well. For years, you've been giving substantial sums to various charities and educational institutions, but your wealth is increasing faster than you can give it away through these traditional channels. "I've been thinking," you say, "about establishing a foundation, something permanent, something that will continue the work long after I'm gone." Junior's eyes light up. This is clearly an idea that resonates with him. "What sort of work, specifically?" "The root causes," you say. "Not just treating symptoms of society's ills, but addressing their sources: education, medical research, public health." This is actually a pretty revolutionary idea for the time. Most wealthy people gave to charity, sure, but usually in a scattered, reactive way. Rockefeller was proposing something much more systematic and forward-looking. 2 years later, in 1913, the Rockefeller Foundation is officially established with an initial endowment of $100 million over $2.6 billion in today's money. Its mission is ambitious: to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. You appoint Junior and Frederick Gates to lead the foundation, with a board of distinguished scientists, educators, and public health experts to guide its work. "Sir," your secretary interrupts one afternoon, "Dr. Welch is here to see you." Dr. William Welch, a prominent physician and one of the directors of your foundation, enters your office with an air of excitement. "Mr. Rockefeller," he says, "I believe we've found a promising direction for our medical research funding." He proceeds to tell you about hookworm disease, a parasitic infection that affects millions of people, particularly in the American South. The disease causes anemia, weakness, and developmental problems in children. "The wonderful thing," Welch explains, leaning forward eagerly, "is that we know how to prevent and treat it. It's not like cancer or tuberculosis, where the medical science is still developing. With hookworm, we know what to do. We just need the resources to do it on a large scale." You listen carefully, asking occasional questions about costs, logistics, and expected outcomes. This is exactly the kind of project you've been looking for, one where a strategic investment can make a dramatic difference. "Draft a proposal," you say finally. "Let's make this happen." The Rockefeller Sanitary Commission for the Eradication of Hookworm Disease becomes one of your foundation's first major initiatives. Within a few years, it dramatically reduces the incidence of hookworm in the southern United States and establishes a model for future public health campaigns around the world. This is just the beginning. The Rockefeller Foundation goes on to fund the development of the yellow fever vaccine, establish the first schools of public health, modernize medical education, and support agricultural improvements that will eventually help feed millions. Your approach to philanthropy is the same as your approach to business: methodical, strategic, focused on maximum impact. You're not interested in having buildings named after you or receiving public accolades. You want results. Mr. Rockefeller, a reporter asks at a rare press conference, why are you giving away so much of your fortune? You consider the question. God gave me my money, you say simply. I believe the power to make money is a gift from God, to be developed and used to the best of our ability for the good of mankind. Despite your increasing focus on philanthropy, your wealth continues to grow at an astonishing rate. The successor companies to Standard Oil are thriving in the new automobile-centered economy. Your investments in